Thank you very much, Declan, and thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. And it is, as Declan said, it's so lovely to see many James Lind Alliance veterans, I could call them, and people who are currently involved in JLA priority setting partnerships. So, and apologies to you, because you may know some of the things I'm about to say, so, but it's great to see you. So, I wanted to start by saying that thousands of patients, people with lived experience have been involved in priority setting partnerships. They have been involved in steering groups, in participating in workshops and contributing to surveys. So they've contributed their knowledge, experience and insight into their health conditions to contribute to shaping the research agenda. And, you know, we need to say a big thank you to those people. But JLA is not PPI. It's not just about patients. It's about patients coming together with carers and clinicians to, in priority setting partnerships, to identify and agree the top 10 priorities for research in a particular condition or setting. So why do we involve patients and clinicians? Well, who normally decides what gets research? Well, typically that's researchers, research funders, and the pharmaceutical industry. But there's a lot of evidence to show that the priorities of people with the conditions and those who treat and care for them can be very different from the priorities of the people who want to do the research. There's evidence of that, a real mismatch, and this is just an example of that mismatch. In 2015, Sally Crowe, who was one of the founders of the James Lind Alliance, did a study that looked at the interventions mentioned in commercial trials and non-commercial trials and compared those with the priorities of patients from JLA PSPs, and she found that there is that mismatch. If you can see the big grey in the first column, the priorities of patients tended to focus on things like education, training, living better with a condition, but the trials in commercial and non-commercial trials tended to focus on drugs, vaccines and interventions. So that mismatch is something that it was Ian Chalmers who thought long and hard about these issues and cared about the waste in research, cared that a lot of research wasn't really addressing the things that mattered most to the people who are most affected by the research. And so in 2004, he established with colleagues Dr. John Scadding and Nick Partridge, who was the chief exec of the Terence Higgins Trust at the time, they set about developing this method called the James Lind Alliance Priority Setting Partnerships. And it was to bring patients, those who care for them and treat them, together to identify and set priorities for research. And this also plays into the agenda about waste in research. Sir Ian Chalmers wrote a series in The Lancet about avoiding waste in research and the amount of waste that gets done, the amount of research that is just wasted. It's not published, it's not addressing the appropriate questions. The National Institute for Health and Care Research in the UK has taken on board the avoidable waste agenda and has established a framework for all the research that it funds, ensuring along the research pathway that it's avoiding waste at every stage. And the James Lind Alliance sits very much in that first pillar of ensuring that the research that gets funded is research that is really addressing the important issues. So, what are PSPs? Well, they are single condition in a health setting or in a condition, as I said. They focus on patients, carers and clinicians working together as equals. So whatever your experience of that condition, whether you have lived experience or whether you're a professional, your voice, your say is of equal value. They identify unanswered questions or evidence uncertainties, and they prioritise the most important into a top 10 and then promote that top 10 to researchers and funders. All JLA PSPs adhere to a set of principles and that's about transparency of process. So it's clear that all the decisions made by each steering group, all the decisions made in the process are clear, and people can see what decisions have been made. That there's a balanced inclusion of all those people, all those perspectives. We exclude professionals who don't treat patients, and we exclude any groups that may have competing interests in the outcomes. And the final principle is around, we don't make new evidence, we're contributing the priorities around using the existing evidence base to make sure that questions are not already answered. So the method, Sinead, I think, talked about her method that's clearly been inspired by the JLA. So the process takes about 12 to 18 months. It requires huge commitment from the people involved. As people here around the table probably know, people do this not as their day job generally, it's in their part-time among all the other things they do. So a PSP has to work with one of our trained JLA advisors who oversees the project, ensures that that there is that neutral facilitation of the piece. We form a steering group that's made up of patients, carers and clinicians. The next phase is to gather uncertainties. That's typically by an online survey, but increasingly, if you really want to reach the populations that are important, the underserved communities who don't often get to influence the research agenda, PSPs have to work that much harder to reach those groups, which may mean going into the communities, maybe doing focus groups, maybe going into community events to try and speak to the people who you want to hear from. All that data is gathered in. Priority summary questions are created, and those summary questions are checked against existing evidence because we don't want anything to go into the priority setting process that's already been answered by research. There's a long list of summary questions that have to be prioritised, so that goes into a survey. And then the final part of the process is the final priority setting workshop, and I've just got some pictures there of the in-person priority setting workshop, which is our ideal. And then we also now developed our priority setting workshop to accommodate online working, which again is really effective, works really well. It's a really important part of the process because all the priority decisions that have been made prior to this part of the process is people making their own individual decisions about what's important. The final workshop is a day where there is a day of knowledge exchange. People can hear other people's perspectives, bringing in those range of voices so you can achieve consensus and get to a top 10. So the next steps, the final workshop is really the beginning of the end of the beginning. The top 10 is achieved. The next task of the PSP is to disseminate those top 10 to researchers and funders to get to actually influence the research agenda. So they may go to launch events, do publications, conferences, social media, blogs, etc. But the next stage is to convert those priorities, which tend to be thematic, broad, not a typical research question. So there's a translational piece of work that has to be done to move from that priority into a research question. Here's just an example of, in fact, it was from the first priority setting workshop on asthma that took place between 2004 and 2007. The priority number 7 was, what are the benefits of breathing exercises as a form of physical therapy for asthma? And that became a health technology assessment study that took 10 years, I think, to get to final publication. So it took 10 years from a question that was identified to getting the answer. So the JLA has been wonderfully successful and influential over the years. We have now got over 150 completed priority setting partnerships in a range of health conditions. I can't list them all, but there's just some examples listed here. Locations are in the UK, and increasingly they're now international. So not only in single countries, we're now doing PSPs that are multi-country, which brings their own challenges and a range of what can I call learnings. PSPs are self-funding though. The JLA doesn't decide what priority setting partnerships happen. Groups come to us, and typically in the UK they're funded by charities, royal colleges, through grant applications, etc. That's just to demonstrate the locations of our current partnerships. I think we've got at least 3 in the Republic of Ireland at the moment, which is great. And they've already been mentioned, but we've also been working with teams here and in Aberdeen to set priorities in methods research, which was a really exciting new venture for the JLA. So rather it being in health conditions, we set priorities in methods research. Also, just to say, we're now experimenting more with the method. Groups are coming to us increasingly with challenges. They want to work with patients, carers and clinicians to set priorities, but their context may be different. So we have established what we call the James Lind Alliance Lab, which is an experimental space away from our JLA PSPs, which we want to maintain the integrity of those, but we've also now got a space where we can support innovation. We can think about new methods. We can think about priority setting in new contexts. So, for example, we are developing our methods and working in low resource settings. We've even got a priority setting partnership at the moment that's actually using alternative funding sources. It is being funded by a pharmaceutical company. We want to test whether it does bring about undue influence or whatever. So we're testing that in the lab to see what will happen. We're also doing a number of PSPs where we're updating priorities that have previously been set in a previous PSP. And we're doing a couple of PSPs within local communities. So we've done a really successful priority setting partnership post-COVID in the black and minority ethnic community in East London. So I've nearly done. So I just wanted to talk about the impact that PSPs have. Not only should they be influencing the research agenda, but they also have the potential to impact on the people who are involved in the PSPs themselves. So here's a quote we got from the Neurodevelopmental Disorders PSP in Canada. And she said, "It was an incredible process, and we know from surveys that every participant felt it was a valuable use of their time. There's value in the process beyond developing the top 10. It helps build community, raise awareness, strengthen relationships with partners." And then a clinician, Naomi Roy, who took part in the Rare Inherited Anemias Priority Setting Partnership, said this: "This has changed how I practice medicine. It's changed my understanding of what it means to listen to patients. It's changed the language I use when I speak with them. Most importantly, it has changed my vision of how to deliver the care we give them. It has made it our vision," which I think is very powerful. So, to say, if you're interested in the JLA, if you're interested in the different PSPs that have taken place, if you're looking for topics for your studies, the JLA website has all the top 10 priorities of the 150 plus PSPs that have taken place. And it's not actually only the top 10s, it's the longer list of priorities that have been identified. So I encourage you to go and look at those if you're looking for topics, not only in our clinical trials methodology PSPs, but also all the condition topics. So please do go and look. And if you want any further information, please come and talk to us. If anyone is interested in setting up a JLA hub in Ireland with a JLA advisor to support all the PSPs that are taking place, we'd be very happy to talk to you as well. So thank you.